core areas is very important to stabilize the body and maintain good posture. These strengthening sequences infuse blood to the muscles of the deep front line, preparing them for their deep openings in the next step, and strengthen the backline muscles that give us the strength to stand tall with our chest and hearts opened. So we're going to be covering recline gentle, wind removing, some core, recline twist, we'll do roll up, cobra, locust, full locust. A lot of these we've done already, and so when we get to those, if you have questions on it, I can answer any questions, but we're going to breeze through it if we've cliniced it before. Cool.
Yeah, if you're watching this as a replay, John just read the 4th step of the Niyata. This is the sequence breakdown, because I recorded it about halfway through talking about that.
Alrighty. And so when we finish standing pose, we do tree right side, tree left side. But notice the hip opening that's happening when we do tree, right? And so we have the inner thigh, so it's flexion and abduction, right? And so we do right side, left side, and then we turn around, light on the back. So it's tree right side, tree left side, turn around, light on the back. And we come into a recline gentle pose. And you can, as you're teaching this, you can take a moment and put them in a Shavasana experience for just a moment or two, and then bring them here if you want to. Totally fine. But so in tree, we do right side, left side, and then here we do both together. What's kind of nice, it's inner thigh work. So you have the adductors, and when you're standing, when you're doing any standing poses, the deep front line is our stability line of the body. Right? It's our major postural line of the body, and so you have the inner thighs that are doing a lot of the work there. Obviously, all the way down into the arches and up through the body, but so we're accessing, opening the inner thighs here, which is kind of nice. So we do it standing, right side, left side, and then we come onto the floor, do both together. This kind of in between hip opener resting pose, right? And then we bring the knees together, and we hug the knees to the chest. It's called wind removing pose. So Pavana is the god of wind. Mukti is to liberate. So this is the god of wind liberation pose, which is, you guys know which wind I'm talking about. Not the wind, but the wind. So
I'd be pissed if I was that guy. You know?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, I'll take a different pose. Thanks.
And so wind removing, we're basically giving ourselves a hug around the shins. You can very simply just catch the shins themselves, or have your students do this. You can interlace the fingers. You can catch opposite wrists, forearms, elbows. And so bringing the knees all the way together, or having them separated. We've talked about this tension versus compression. People may bring the knees all the way together, maybe have a compressive point in the flexion of the femur bone and of this bone when it comes up, right? And so they may not be able to get the thigh actually to the stomach or chest area. And so a little separation can help if they're feeling that way. And it's really gonna dictate if there's no more tension, meaning the hamstrings, the glutes, the low back, that area is open, and they can get the legs all the way down. What they're gonna bump up against next is compression, right? And it could be tightness that they can't get all the way down, so that's fine. They can keep their knees together, just work through the tightness of that part of the back line. Or if they don't feel tight, they just feel restricted, which is gonna be on the opposite side, a pinch in the hip itself, right? That's gonna be the compressive point. Then they can open the knees a little bit and bypass that, right? And be able to get the thighs closer into the stomach. So the idea is to try to get the thighs to the stomach, and then clear out any wind that's there. And so as we inhale, stomach presses into the thighs. We exhale, we pull the knees into the chest. What you'll notice, a lot of people, especially if they're tighter in that part of the back line, when they start to pull the knees down, a lot of times the low back and hips will lift. And so as they pull the knees down to try to get the low back to go down, will help in the opening of that area. Cool. And it's pretty straightforward. Questions on this? Guys on Zoom, you guys have questions? Just unmute yourself and ask a question if there is anything. Cool. All righty. So from here, we do core work. We've covered core work in flow. You guys know core work. There is air chair, which we can look at for a moment, which you'll see in a lot of stability classes. And air chair is just doing this. You bring the calf muscle into a tabletop, and we're working inner thighs. All right, so it's an inner thigh squeeze. So the knees pulling together, so inner thighs light up. And then we're pressing the hands into the lap and then resisting that press. As we do this, the pelvic floor lifts, pit of the abdomen pulls in and up. So we want to access those areas. So it's the inner thighs, pelvic floor. It's all deep front line work. Pit of the abdomen. So we inhale, squeeze, and you can isolate it. So you can do a squeeze with the thighs, it's inner thigh work, and then you can press the hands into the thighs, separate those. So inhale, squeeze the inner thighs. As you exhale, press your hands into your lap, resist that, pelvic floor lifts, pit of the abdomen pulls in and up. Inhale, squeeze the thighs, exhale, press, inhale, squeeze, exhale, press, and go back and forth a few times, and then you can put it together, which you'll hear a lot of times it'll be taught that way. Now, squeeze the inner thighs, hold that squeeze, press your hands to your lap, hold the press, squeezing and pressing at the same time for 5, 4, 3, or 10, 9, 8, 7, all the way through. Cool, so it's air chair. And then after that, you can do any combination of whatever whatever core work you'd like to do. So bicycles, toe touches, leg lifts, leg raises. Yeah. Question on the core work? Pretty straightforward. Covered it. Pretty simple. Okay. In longer Niyata class and longer stability class, a lot of times do a twist here. It's not necessary, but a twist is kind of nice after core work. But we've covered a recline twist already, so let's go with that. So you'll see it in there, recline twist. But that's in longer classes. We'll put a twist there. That's kind of nice. Cool. All right, and then we're going to do a roll up. We've heard, originally we were taught this, we were taught it was a Pilates roll up. I haven't taken Pilates. I don't know exactly what they do, and I'm pretty sure they have a lot of combinations of different roll ups and different things. But the idea is to do some initial, so not initial, but to do a little bit more core work as you're coming up. And traditionally, this was taught as a double exhale and just kind of fling your body up in the Vishnu style.
Anyone ever taken a Bikram class? And you're here and you go inhale and then and they do that. You guys taking that? Yeah.
So it comes from throwing the breath. Throwing the breath is an energization technique that was taught by Paramahansa Yogananda, who was, his given name was Mukunda Ghosh. He was the brother of Vishnu Ghosh. Vishnu Ghosh was a Hatha yoga teacher in India that trained Bikram Chaudhry. Bikram Chaudhry was who brought hot yoga to first Japan and then Hollywood, USA. And then that's where hot yoga kind of exploded. So that's how it all kind of flowed. But anyway, so he's taken parts from the training that his brother did. His brother, Paramahansa Yogananda, Kunda Ghosh, trained with enlightened masters, like direct lineage of enlightened masters, and attained that level of it. I don't know where Vishnu Ghosh ever did or not, but anyway, so you'll see some similarities in some of the teachings. Cool. And so for roll up, we're going to bend the knees, bring the feet flat. We send the arms up to the sky. And as we exhale, we slowly roll up. People will get stuck. If they get stuck, they have options to straighten the legs. That can help them up. They have options to catch the thighs. If straightening the legs doesn't make it much difference, so you can catch the thighs and straighten the legs, kind of pulls you a little forward. See that? Or you can turn to the side, press yourself up, and come up that way. And that's if you have any body pain or any injuries or anything like that. Cool. So we send the arms up and we slowly roll ourselves up, turn around and lie down on our stomach. First, cobra. So we'll cover this cobra because it's going to be a little bit different than the cobras we've covered before. In that, at this stage, the first cobras we do in class, the hands are grounded. And so they're more of an organic experience, meaning we're progressively opening up the superficial front line of the body. In this cobra, it's a little different in that we're strengthening the superficial back line of the body. And we're doing that by lifting the chest and then taking some weight out of the hands. It may be all the weight, it may be just a little bit of weight. It's up to the person, right? If they have any injuries, they may just place some weight in the hands and monitor. But initially, we're going to press the hands into the mat, lift the heart, tops of the feet press down, thighs squeeze, especially the inner thighs. Kneecaps will softly lift. So low body is the anchor, right? We engage and integrate it to help lift. Now his heart's lifting, And you could see, if you could get a visual here, you can see the muscles of the back line, the erector spinae, the muscles there are all engaged right now. So his hands are pressing down. So this would be technically at this stage a modified version of Cobra for what our intention is here. Does that make sense? Now to deepen, he's going to start to take some weight out of his hands. And then to go completely into it, he'll take all the weight out of his hands. That puts all of the strength into the back line. So we're strengthening this area. As opposed to in the other Cobras, we're opening the superficial front line. Is that clear? You guys see this? All right, so it's just intention. Same exact pose, different intention. All right, we're strengthening this part of the line here, where in the first Cobras, we're opening this line, the superficial front line. Cool? So he lifts his hands up, and then we come down, left cheek on the mat, arms by our sides, palms up. Questions on that? Is that clear with it? You guys understand? Like, so this is Cobra, just like those are Cobras. We're just approaching this with a different intention. Cool? Okay, so Locust. Locust, he's gonna spin his palms down and slide his arms really tight to his body. This is the modified version. So he could just work here. Chin or mouth to the mat. And then one leg can lift, other leg can lift, both legs lift. And that's kind of where we're going with it. So he can do it with his arms just like this, right? Or he can roll over to his left. Go to your right first, actually. Roll over to his right, slide his left arm underneath the body so that the palm is flat and the form is to the inside of the hip pointer. And then he rolls over that arm and slides the other arm underneath his body. Palm flat, form to the inside of the hip pointer. So he's basically doing this. It's like a dig in volleyball. If you guys ever play volleyball, I think it's called a dig. Right? It's that kind of pop. You'll hear some teachers say it's a serve. It's not a serve. A serve is overhand. Right? A dig is this, whatever that's called. Right? It's that kind of getting the ball that way. So that's kind of where we are with it. Now, if I have compressive point in my elbow that only lets me straighten my arm this much, right? Which is out there. You guys will see it when you start to teach. Then putting all my body weight on my elbow may not be a great thing, or on my arm. You guys, does that make sense? You guys see that? But it's not a tensile thing anymore. I'm not trying to open up this area of the body, where if I can straighten my elbow all the way out, but I get locked here because of tension, that may be okay. It may help me open that area of the body. I have to be aware, but it may be all right. But if it's a compressive point here, and then I put all my body weight on it, I may not be doing a great thing for my elbow, right? So we have to understand on that level of tension versus compression. So if I were that person where you say, hey, let me go ahead and straighten your arm, and they go to here, are you feeling it here at all? No, I feel it right there a little bit, but that's where I go. Well, then try arms by your sides, palms flat. There'll be a better position if doing this is too much intensity or pain on the elbow. That's just a compressive point, right? So we'll say Chris' elbows are fine. His arms are underneath his body. And then we take the right leg high. Leg is straight and strong, so it's not bent. A lot of times you'll see the leg do this. Right? So we want to engage the quadriceps, straighten the leg, lift from the superficial back line. And the leg goes down. We lift the other leg up, extending. And then that leg goes down. And then we make two adjustments. Mouth to the mat, if it's not already there. A lot of people will already do mouth on the mat, but if they're not, mouth to the mat. And then we reach the arms a little bit lower, just shifting center of gravity some. We're going to press the hands down, and we're going to lift both legs up. Does not matter how high. It could be a couple inches. Totally fine. They're getting the same work that they need. They're strengthening the area they need. It could be higher up. Right? Some people can get it almost vertical or go vertical with this.
Are your like feet supposed to be? What are the feet supposed to be like in that?
You can have big toes touching if you want.
Okay.
It's fine. But you want separation in the heels. Because what we want to avoid, and this goes for Cobra, this goes for this goes for any back bending that we do, is we want to avoid heels together.
You don't want your legs to spread too far out, right?
Yeah, not exactly. I think of a negative with having them too far out. One doesn't pop into my mind right now. I'll think on it a little bit, but yeah, but traditionally it's taught with the legs 2 to 3 inches apart. Big toes can touch. They can be a little separated. I don't see too many people try to bring them too wide, but yeah, I'll think about it a little bit, see if there's a reason why not. Yeah. Okay.
Can you explain why you want your heels not touching? What does that do to your body?
So anytime we're back bending, when your heels are touching, what's most likely going on is you're squeezing the glutes. And so when we squeeze the glutes, right, so there's a squeezing of the glutes, heels touching also creates an an external rotation of the femur bones, right? So puts pressure, right? Puts pressure, base turn around, Chris. So it's puts pressure in this area. So squeezing the heels together, glute squeeze, inner rotation of or external rotation of the thighs, which will start to put pressure here and here, and then we're back bending. So it starts to put pressure there. So we want to relieve any pressure in the low back by structuring our low body in a specific way. And that specific way is having your heels separated. Heels basically in line with second and third toes, so as we mountain pose. So the heels are separated, which puts space around the sacrum, and then letting the inner thighs engage more so than the glutes. Glutes will engage to some degree, but people tend to over-engage the glutes and then put way too much pressure on their low back and then back bend into it, which compresses that even more. So in this particular pose, we're not back bending, we're doing hip extension. So it's still putting that compressive pressure potentially there. So that's the why. So structuring the low body that way will keep space there. More so, but with students, especially newer students. Cool. Right side, left side, and then both together. We were in both together, I think. That's where we were. And then come on down. I think we're good. And then the right cheek to the mat, look to the left. Questions on that? Let's go with that. So it's locus from the stability of Niyata or Vishnu Ghosh lineage. And then full locus, we've covered full locus already. Full locus, we're just coming into it with the arms going wide first, chin or mouth to the mat, structure the legs, same stuff. And with an inhale, we lift the chest, we lift the arms, we lift the legs. And we've covered this already. If we keep our arms, the only thing I'll say to this, if we keep our arms wide, there's more work for the back muscles. If we bring our arms together, interlace the fingers, less work in the back muscles. Because now you have the leverage of the arms that are behind you helping to lift the chest. Not a bad thing, it just becomes more of an organic experience as far as the opening through the front of the body. Just fine, maybe somebody wants that. But if you keep your arms wide, you'll get more shoulder and back work.
So you're cueing arms wide and giving them the option.
In a stability class, I just cue this. I just leave them here and let them get that work. In a flow class, sometimes I'll give the option to stay here or interlace the fingers and kind of do a build that way. Cool. So that's full locus. You guys good with that? And that puts us into the fifth step. So if you open up your manuals, this is page 25. I'll just read over it real fast and then we'll jump into these poses. And so this fifth step is back bending or deep back bending. For the majority of each day, we are under compressive pressure of gravity. The back bending series neutralizes this constant pressure on our bodies, allowing us to stand taller and lighter. The step is when it all comes together. The core work, Sphinx, Hero, and Bow have specifically prepared the front body for the deep opening expressed in the Pinnacle Camel. All right, and so the first one we're going to look at, and I believe we've covered this already too, is Sphinx. And so Chris will come up onto his elbows. So elbows underneath the shoulders. Feet are 3 to 5 inches apart, heels behind second and third toes. You can press the tops of the feet down and squeeze the thighs so the kneecaps lift, or you can tuck the toes under. And then squeeze the thighs, kneecaps lift. We press the forearms down. We draw the elbows. This is an energetic movement or an isometric movement. We draw the elbows towards the hips back towards the elbows, the heart lifts higher. We pull the line of the jaw back, the heart lifts higher. You guys can see the back bend that's happening there. So it's initially it's a passive back bend because or more of an organic back bend because we're supporting ourselves with our upper arms. You guys can see that, right? His back bend is happening because his upper arms are vertical. We create a deeper experience by using muscular energy. What I mean by that is we turn the legs on. The legs are actually on, they're integrated anyway, but we start to pull the elbows back, start to pull the hips forward energetically. We draw the line of the jaw back. That's an actual movement, not just energetic, but you can see the line of his jaw going back, and you'll feel the heart lift higher. So it's subtle, but we can go deeper by engaging the right areas. You guys can see that. Cool. And then we come on down.
From here, we just put the forehead to the mat and press right up. We'll balance out the neck after we do floor bell.
And he's going to walk his knees up. And we're going to show two poses here. The first is going to be one we've covered already. And then we'll show another one, an alternative, and then we'll kind of get into the why of it. So first, Chris is going to walk to the middle of that, separate his knees about 6 to 8 inches, and then draw his hips to his heels. I think initially, and we may have it in the script as going wide, and a lot of teachers teaching to go wide. Don't go too wide. If you go too wide, you bypass the hip flexors. It's actually a quadricep muscle called rectus femoris, but it's one of the major muscles in the quadricep group that cross over both joints, the knee and the hip, right? And you'll see a lot of like deep back bending. It's one of those guys where poses start to get into the kind of performance-y thing, where if Chris was doing some scorpion variation or something like that, or an alternative of that, he would bring his knees wide so that he has a better chance of getting his toes to his head, right? All performance-based. So for the look, like if he was in forearm balance or a handstand and doing a scorpion, or if he was in like full cobra and doing something like that, bringing the knees wide bypasses that muscle, which is one of those muscles that's really challenging to open, so that you can go deeper into hip extension, right? And so basically my point is don't do that here, right? We want to get into rectus femoris, we want to get into the iliacus and into the psoas, those major hip flexor muscles, because it's the kind of the point of what we're doing, right? We're not concerned about performance, we're focused on progressively opening up the body. Does that make sense?
So you're saying if you open your legs wider,
It gets easier. It's easier, right? Because we bypass that rec fem, right? Rectus femoris. Right? And so when we're doing cowboy or cowgirl, don't bring the knees too wide, right? 6 to 8 inches apart. Could be roughly shoulder width, or maybe hip to shoulder width. That kind of range is kind of where we want to land, right? If we go too wide, some teachers say, bring the knees all the way to the edges of the mat. That's too wide.
that's why I don't feel it.
That's probably why you don't feel it.
Could be. Yeah.
So if you keep them closer, keep them about hip width, 6 to 8 inches is what I'll usually say. Then you're not bypassing rectus femoris, because it could be that that particular muscle, Beth, is where you need to open, but what's you're bypassing, and that the iliopsoas group is open enough for you. So when you come into it, you're like, no, I don't really feel a whole lot. Try keeping your knees a little closer and see if that makes a difference. And we'll practice, and you can play with it a little bit. Cool. So Chris is going to open his knees, all that to say that. Chris opens up his knees 6 to 8 inches, places his hands back behind him. We've covered this already, so I don't need to go into detail. And his hands are about 5, 6, 7 inches away from his feet, but in line with his shoulders. He's going to ground the shins down and lift his hips up, and then draw his hips forward. If you have tightness in the shoulders, this may prevent you from going deeper into the hips. So you may feel locked up here before you feel an opening here. Does that make sense? So if that's the case, spin your hands so you can take it from the anterior delt to more of an opening to the mid delt, right? So it's not as intense. That tends to be a little more open than anterior delt.
How do you do that? Instead of externally rotating, inwardly rotate.
Just enough, right? So we're not saying here.
Yeah. To there, just go back to here, and it'll change that pressure.
And you can also be on knuckle pads, or Chris is doing knuckle pads, or it can be on fingertips. Use blocks if you want to here. And so the hips go high, hips go forward. And that's the opening.
So when I've seen people in class grab their feet, that's not what we want to have happen.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Exactly.
Something else entirely, right?
Yeah, they're going into more of a full camel position.
Maybe not full camel, but camel.
Well, the knees being wide is the leg position for full camel.
Yeah, besides the forearms being down.
Yeah.
I've noticed that there's just recently disability saying like, because I think people are doing that, like, what are they doing, like, well, basically like script that says leave your hands where they are.
Yeah.
Like, something like something.
Yeah, there's a specific there because if Chris comes into into cowboy, right? You guys see cowboy, and then so notice this is what I want you to pay attention to. So we're just break down real fast. Notice how straight his spine is. A little curve to it, but it's fairly straight. And what I'm saying is this area here, right? That's fairly straight, so that we can isolate and access the opening of the front of the hips, right? This is the difference between hip extension and spine extension. When we're working deep back bending, this is what you're going to notice is we do hip extension, we do spine extension, or we do spine extension, we do hip extension. Spine extension, hip extension. We isolate the two, and then we put it together. This is simple to complex, guys, right? Simple, simple, complex, and then more complex potentially, right? So we put hip extension, spine extension together, and then we build it. Sorry, because I left you here forever. But if Chris is in this pose, he really needed his hip flexors open today. If you see how straight it is now, if he walks his hands to his
How can I be better because of this?
You're anti-fragile, my friend. You walk your hands to your feet. Notice what happens to his spine when he walks into his feet. Right? There was an intensity of an arch here. It's hard to see with a shirt, but you guys get my point. You notice it in the front of the body rounded more, right? This is camel, right? Or kind of, there's a variation of what Chris said, a full camel with the knees wide, but this is camel, right? Now we're putting it spine extension and hip extension together. If he keeps his, walk your hands back a little bit more even. Oh no, the other way, back. All right, now join your hips forward. I just want to exaggerate a little bit. So if he, you guys see the difference here, there's a little arch, but it's way straighter than it was before so that we can get more work here, right? That's the idea. Cowboy, hip extension, sphinx, spine extension. We're going to do floor bow in a minute, and that's going to put it together for the first go round.
So and what are your thoughts on, I mean, I know you took hero and reclining hero out because
Yeah, what we noticed over especially last year or so is that, so what John just said is to create the fullest back bend, you need hip extension, spinal extension. And forever, reclining hero was our hip extension. But then what was happening, and it's good for the knee, like it's good as long as people are approaching it right, but people weren't getting any hip extension. In fact, there's flexion because this is where they're staying or they're sitting on a block. And because the full expression is the only way you're going to get hip extension, which is being able to go all the way back here, which is really just more of a neutral position to go way back. Now you're really getting the depth of hip extension that we're looking for. And 90, if not more % of the class, routinely, we're getting 0 hip extension.
And I would even dare to say here, so this is full expression, right? He's mostly getting rec fem, which is part of the quadricep group. He's probably not, but maybe just a little bit getting the iliopsoas group, which is the major hip extension group that we really want to access, right? So that's not really happening. So, but this is traditionally what we were taught, right? These are the specific frame of poses that you do. And so we kept it in as, okay, this is potentially getting hip extension. But in reality, what Chris mentioned is most people were just sitting and actually doing the opposite of it. They weren't getting hip extension. They were getting hip flexion because they were just basically sitting with their, with their hips up or forward. So we were saying, okay, we're doing this pose to get a specific result, but it's not giving us the result most of the time. So we need to change that. And so that was the shift.
So I think for me, and I don't know if other people feel this way, but still, because I think I feel like I'm getting more out of hero or reclining hero, but I am definitely, it's my fault.
Yeah.
Much more probably than
yeah.
And I think then cowboy cowgirl thing is I think I was just doing it.
Yeah.
So I'm not benefiting from it.
Yeah.
Your expectation of both.
Yeah, exactly right.
So important,
in the methodology
It's
of how we're
methodology.
teaching, right? And
It's
so
understanding,
it's not to say, just so we're all clear, like hero reclining hero, still a good pose, right? Still, it's got a lot of good benefits, but not giving us the result that we're looking for most of the people because of knee stuff. As far as like when you start teaching, you're going to see you're teaching, cowgirl, cowboy, and you see people's hands walking up to their feet. I'm not of the opinion like if they're going to do that, okay, they have hip extension, they got spinal extension, they're put together, the body can do it. Okay, whatever. But I'm not going to teach it that way because I want to prep the people who have super tight hip flexors to get that opening first before I start putting it together. Again, we're still always going back to the methodology, which is not to say I'm going to pull people back from going that deeper experience in a class, like in the reality of like the practical nature of it. But I'm always going to teach with the simple to complex concept in mind.
And you may decide to do a breakout moment at that point. If you notice there's 3 or 4 or 5 people in your class that are continually doing that, walking the hands up to the heels and taking a camel variation, you may say, all right, everyone stop for a moment. Let me show you something. And you're not calling them out, but you're saying, here's a teaching moment for the entire class. Let me show you what we're doing. And here's the why. Here's the methodology. So in this point, in back bending, we're doing isolating hip extension, spine extension, and this. So this pose specifically, cowboy, isolates hip extension. This is why we do this, blah, blah, blah. And now here's what a lot of people will get confused about is they think, oh, it's just like camel and I walk my hands up. But if we walk our hands up, then blah, 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 and we're combining hip extension, blah, going into the whole meat of it. And they'll be like, oh, that's why. I'll do it this way. They'll understand the methodology and realize, okay, there's a bigger principle that we're following. Cool.
So that was cowgirl, cowboy that we've been inputted into it. Did you want to say the different posts? You want to show hero?
Oh, it was just hero reclining hero. Yeah. So hero reclining hero. What we used to do, and just to show you guys, bring your knees together. Actually, bringing the feet together too is really the beginning stage of it, right? This is the first part of hero, is sitting on your heels. Some people will get a huge opening in the quadricep group just doing that. To deepen, he'll place his hands forward, open up his feet wide enough to sit in between, and then lower his hips down. Maybe not all the way to the floor. Maybe to blocks. Maybe he hovers. Maybe he holds it higher. Right? And again, like Chris said, this can have benefit. If you're doing a pose that you want to balance out, the pose that you're lifting, you have quadricep engagement, and you want to balance it out by doing this at some point. This may be a good pose to plug in somewhere. So to go deeper, he'll sit his hips all the way down to the floor. We really want to look out, if you are deciding to teach this in any class, look at people's feet, their shins and toes should be pointing in one line behind them. The feet shouldn't be sickling out or sickling in. And the foot positioning is going to help protect the knee. So it's important that the foot position is right. And so he lowers the upper body down, coming into the elbows, and then maybe the shoulders come all the way down. And he may reach up and over his head, catch opposite elbows. You'll notice the arch. You guys can see this, right? The arch. And put this underneath. Sorry. It's funny.
It's an 80s thing.
It's an 80s. Back to 80s. Is you notice the arch there? This is important. You don't want to flatten that. You want an arch to be there. All right, so it's shoulders and the hips, and that'll help with that pull in the front. Cool. And to come out of it, we're going to reach for the feet. We'll pull up to the elbows, push off with the hands, and then come forward. And we usually come into down dog, walk it out. So regardless, we came into cowboy, we'll come back into down dog. And you could walk it out after doing cowboy too, but definitely after, if you do hero, walking it out, it's really nice. Cool. Questions on hero? Reclining hero? Pretty straightforward. Okay, so from here, we're going to come forward, lower all the way down. And Chris will bring his forehead to the mat. He's going to bend his knees and reach back for his feet. So in specific classes, when we do floor bow, we do bow, so this comes back to isolation again, if we have not done spine extension prior to this, it's not the case in stability classes. So this would be in kind of the vinyasa, the flow mindset. If you haven't done spine extension prior to this, make this a spine extension pose. So this is what you guys are seeing, what you're experiencing when you take a flow class is what. So we're doing floor bow. Why don't we kick up? Because we haven't put it all together yet, right? Remember, simple, simple, complex. Simple to complex is the idea. So this would be, if this was a flow class, it would be more simple to reach down for the ankles. People may not catch the ankles. They can do it from the feet, totally fine. But just kicking back creates spine extension. You guys see that, right? So the thighs stay down, creating spine extension by just kicking back. When he starts to kick up, he's now doing hip extension. It's just from the other way, right? Because the floor is there and his hips can't go down, right? We take the thighs up to create that same experience of hip extension that like a cowboy would have done because he can draw his hips forward. You guys get that? Understand what I'm saying? So in a flow class, we just kick back, just do spine extension. But at this point in Niyata, we've done it already. We've done spine extension, we have a hip extension. We're using this as a more complex experience, putting it together, and kicking back and kicking up. So when I teach this in a stability class, I teach them right into it. Go ahead and kick back. How does that feel? All right, now go ahead and kick up. How does that feel? If it feels intense, you can back off one or the other. Totally fine. If you're only coming up 1 inch, totally fine. You may lift the chest 1 inch and the thighs may lift 1 inch. Totally fine. You're there. Work there. Maintain, blah, 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 all the stuff. All right, so we're kicking back, kicking up, hip extension, spine extension. The feet are in line with the shoulders, knees in line with the shoulders, so just about that wide. Chris could shift his gaze up a little bit. He's not dumping the back of the neck, but there could be a little bit of arch there. And then he comes all the way down, opposite cheek to the mat. Heels drop open. Right? The heels drop open to create an internal rotation of the femur bones, to create space around the low back and sacrum, especially after we just did that, right? Hip extension, spine extension. Tendency to put a lot of pressure around that area is high, so doing this specifically helps. We rest and let the thighs do that motion. Cool. All right. Questions on floor bow? Pretty straightforward.
This is not exactly related, but just curious, what is the studio's take on like walking on feet?
We don't touch anyone ever. No, Beth, sorry, but I was making a joke. Beth asked, what's the studio's policy on walking on people's feet? And that's why I said we don't touch anyone ever.
Since it was proven that you can get COVID through the feet, we're like, no touching feet, feet to feet. Like if you know the person, so when we get to a point where we can touch each other again, and you know the person, totally fine. If they're kind of newer, I usually don't. As you don't know, it was a long time ago. There was a woman who owned a tile company, and we hired her to do the tile in Norfolk. This is way back when. So she did the tile in Norfolk, and she worked with Jimmy on some other projects off on the side. But she started practicing a little bit. She was kind of rough and tumble woman. But we had a little bit of relationship because we were working, like we built a studio kind of with her, and she was there. We were doing everything, but she was taking class, and I went to go. Like I felt like a little more of she wasn't brand new. I felt like a little more connection. So I go to kind of massage, I'm gonna give you some love, step on her feet. She's like, no, I'm missing bones in one of my feet. You can't step on her. I'm like, I was like, you're missing bones? I don't even understand what that means. So anyway, it was one of those where I felt comfortable enough, but I really said, hey, I really should have asked her, hey, do you want me to walk on your feet? Or something like that, where she was like, I could have gotten information. She was like, no, I'm okay. I don't have bones in my I'm missing bones.
Some people are germaphobes too. They don't want like other feet, and they think what's heightened now. So right now the policy is like no hands on, no touching. Yeah. If you know the teacher, you walk over and be like, hey, you walk on my feet today. I would appreciate that. And most likely you'll walk on your feet.
At some point we will all wear the scarlet letter that we are okay to be walked on or be touched. You can touch me. I'm okay. Yes.
So we press up to the knees and we do the pinnacle, which is camel.
Pinnacle is camel. So camel, separate the knees 6 to 8 inches, feet in line with the knees for this one. And we place the hands to the low back, the glutes, the upper thighs. We'll ground the shins and we'll lift the heart. And we're in the pose. So right here, we're in the pose. People are doing it as soon as they do this. As soon as they lift the heart, even if the gaze is forward, they don't even have to drop the head back. Gaze can be forward, the heart can lift, they can stay right there. We got to, before I take you too deep, I'll talk to you. You got to understand, like, especially a pose like this, a deep back bend is a vulnerable pose for people because a lot of people live their life the opposite of this. We've covered this pose already, so you guys know it, but a lot of people live their life like this, especially if they've had a hurt heart, right? They've been in bad relationships, they've been in abusive relationships, their parents may have been a certain way to them, and they get closed off. But the mind is the builder, right? How we're feeling is how we is what we represent in our bodies. You can get so much information, and you'll do this as you start to teach people. You get so much information on someone's inner workings by how they present themselves, by how they hold themselves, by how they move in their bodies, right? It says a novel. So point being that this can be a challenging pose for people because we're asking them to do the opposite. We're asking them to be vulnerable, to open up, to expose the vital areas of their body, right? And so the major point with that was for some people, just lifting the heart is going to be a lot, right? And just let them be there, obviously, right? To go deeper, Chris is going to take his upper body back more, and then he can reach for his heels. Now, Chris tucked his toes under to get his heels higher, totally fine, right? So it's a little bit of an extension. He may not need that, and so the top so that he can come down. You'll notice how it just took him deeper, right? And once he has his heels, he's going to draw his hips forward. There's hip extension. He's going to lift his heart high, try to lift out of the low back the best he can. We don't want to jam. We want to avoid jamming there, right? And some people, just because of the structure of their body, may feel jamming the moment they reach for their heels. So they may need to tuck the toes and get the heels a little higher to get out of the low back, right? Hips draw forward, heart high. The head's he's drawing the line of the jaw back first and then taking the chin back. That's the key to keeping integrity in the front of the throat to balance the opening through the back of the neck. So there's an arch here. It's going to be hard for some of you guys to see it, but there's an arch here. If you were to let go of the integrity of the front of the throat and just drop the head all the way back, that turned into a hinge, meaning it just put all the pressure, focus the pressure to one point in the spine, in the upper part of the spine, the cervical region, right, the upper part. Which isn't, like, people may pull it off 1, 2, 50, 100, 1,000 times and feel fine. They may have that much space. You may have one person that does it one time and injures their neck, right? So we want to teach in a way that's going to maintain that health, right? So that's the way of doing it. And we've covered camel.
Hey, John.
Yeah.
Hey, John. I have a question. Is it okay to reach back and grab your heels if it's really all in your hips and you're really not creating any kind of back bend?
So like,
yeah,
I'm trying to picture what that would look like in my mind. Is that Sherry? Is that you?
okay, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, so like I can sometimes lean back and grab my heels, but I really don't have an arch.
Try to do that, Chris. So go onto your knees. Let me see if I'm tracking with you. So hold on real quick.
It's more or less I'm just leaning back. I'm not really
like,
creating a back bend.
Like this?
Like this?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm exaggerating.
I'm trying to create a back bend, but it hurts. But so should I just not try to reach for my heels?
I would instead. It's Sherry, right? Is this Sherry? Sounds like Sherry.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
Sherry. Okay.
Where does it?
Like, no, this is somebody else. Go ahead, Chris.
Where does it hurt?
Lower back.
Yeah. So what I would do, Sherry, is stay high, keep your hands to your low back, and work on lifting the heart and maintaining length through the low back. So tail drawing down. So it's all mountain pose stuff. It's tail drawing down, engaging the inner thighs. What I would also try doing is putting a block between the legs. Excuse me. And if you put it, so this is position 1. This is position 2. This is position 3 for a block. It's kind of universal. Position 1, position 2, position 3. right? I would do position 2 and put it as high up as I can. And then squeeze with your inner thigh, squeeze the block. This is gets the deep front line working in the lower half anyway. And then lift the heart high, try to lift out of your low back, and then to take the upper body back to whatever degree feels okay in your body. What I think is probably happening is there's some integration pieces that just need to be tuned in a little more and to maintain the low back integrity.
Thank you. That sounds awesome.
Cool.
Yeah,
You're
and
welcome.
the only other thing I'd say, Sherry, is like it sounded like what you're looking for when you reach back is hip extension because you want to feel it in the hips.
Okay.
Work other poses that will do that and not camel to get it simply because of how it will compromise the low back. Does that make sense?
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank
'Cause
you.
Yeah.
You're welcome. If it's low back pain and you put your hands back and draw your hips forward, there's going to be and it may be structural for you, but there's a higher tendency of putting more pressure in the low back at that point. So I would stay higher and work the back bend a little more. And then, like Chris said, to the poses prior to this, like cowboy, cowgirl, work that a little more to get the hip extension piece. That makes
That
sense.
actually makes a lot of sense. Thank you so much.
Cool. You're welcome.
Cool. Then right after that, we do a peaceful warrior to give people a moment to rest.
Mm-hmm.
And then that camel is the end of the step
The back bends.
5.
Step
Right?
5. Yeah.
And then we will go into step 6 later. Yeah. Yeah. Elizabeth just said putting a block between her legs for camel was a game changer for her.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
big.
she's mentioning to Sherry, but yeah, it's super important because it helps integrate the legs, integrate the inner thighs, fires up the deep front line, and that's the stabilizing line for all movement. Cool. All right, let's take a break. When we come back, we're going to meditate, we're going to practice, and then we'll go to lunch. Cool. And Zoom people, you don't need to change anything. We're on this dedicated meeting room for today and tomorrow. We separated it out so that we can do our own stuff with regardless of the what's happening for the live streaming classes in the studio. So you guys are good to go. We'll take a quick break and we come back. We'll meditate, practice.
Yeah, that was the idea.